Hello everyone and welcome back to the Chicken-Legged Hut. I am the Hermit, and in today's video, the Fool and I are going to be making some pocket altars. These were common during both world wars, or I guess just times of war in general. They're also common amongst travelers that might need to maintain their faith but don't have access to a traditional altar. Now, I just learned about these from a Reddit post and one of the occult subreddits we follow and thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I kind of want to make my own now. So I ordered 40 of these black tin containers, mostly because it was a good deal and I figured we could use them for a couple different projects in the future. But I didn't originally plan on making a video of me making my personal pocket altar, so I didn't record any of it. Then later I get a message from the Fool saying, I got my stuff recorded for the pocket altar video. So I made my way back to the hut, which is not an easy thing to do, and basically remade my pocket altar so I could get some footage for this video, which actually kind of worked out because I like this version a little better. The first one was a little more messy and chaotic, which I didn't really mind since chaos magic is kind of my thing, but it was noisy as hell and kind of annoying. But with this one, it's a little cleaner, a little more thought out, and definitely makes less noise when you walk around with it. I also knew when I originally made mine that I was going to constantly be making changes to it. Like, I still have a couple of things I would like to make and add to it in the future, but for now it serves its intended purpose. When it comes to the actual process of making this, it was fairly simple. I used a mix of Mod Podge and black acrylic paint to attach my card to the lid. I then used a combination of these gemstones that the Fool had picked up at some point, as well as some of these small glass bottles and other various components we had in the hut. Except for the whiskers, those were a gift from my cat that I was lucky enough to actually find. But I used all these things to craft up a couple mini spell jars, and most of what's in here is meant to be protective or helpful for my own personal growth in some way. The talisman was made with a bling pendant that we picked up a bunch of to use for projects and videos. The picture inside came out of one of the first books I ever got on alchemy, and since that's one of the books that really piqued my interest in the occult, it sort of provides a deeper connection for me, I guess. But that was made prior to recording this and I couldn't exactly remake it. However, for the spell jar with the cat whiskers, I just straight up forgot to record. Like, I got some of it, but there's a good chunk that's just missing, which is my bad. I was probably a baked potato when I recorded this. Like, I show you what I'm putting in there, but that's it. Honestly, I think I had a problem getting the cork out of one of these bottles and stopped recording so I didn't look like an idiot for struggling so much. And then I just never hit record again. I don't know, whatever. I'm sure you get the idea. Moving on. When it came to this bottle of black salt, I knew I wanted to add a chunk of obsidian to it since both of those things are used for protection against negative energy. It made sense to combine them in the same spell jar. Of course, most of the chunks were too big to actually fit in the bottle. I mean, even the chunk I did use barely fit. I was pretty sure I was just gonna get it stuck, but I managed to get it through eventually. And once I had both of these spell jars complete, the only thing left to do was clean up my mess and seal them both shut. Now, if you were here for the last video, you might remember me saying something about using the seal wax we picked up in a future project. Well, I guess this is the future project because I'm going to use that seal wax on these mini spell jars. This was my first time ever using seal wax, and let's just say I wish I would have had this for all those potion bottles. It would have been way easier than the UV resin, and honestly they probably would have looked cooler. Oh well, I'm not gonna dwell on it, but I will definitely be using it on the next set of potion bottles I make. But since these bottles are so small, I only had to use a single chunk of wax for each one, so we still have a bunch left over for future uses. We got this stuff in a kit online that came with a bunch of different colored seal wax, as well as the warmer and spoon. If you just Google search seal wax kit, you'll find it. For the colors, I went with the gold for the whisker jar because I thought it was a nice contrast to the blues and purples of the stones. And for the black salt jar, I went with the purple because I just really like the black and purple combo. I also added a couple extra bits to the altar later on, like a couple chunks of cinnamon, 2 of the buttons we made when we first started the channel, and a piece of the paper the Fool made by hand for his bookbinding video. And like I said earlier, there are things I would still like to make and add to this eventually, but I'll save those for future projects and videos, I guess. But that's basically it for me. I don't really have too much else to say other than this was another fun project that's simple enough anyone could do it. I mean, you would have to be some kind of fool to mess up making one of these. And you can really personalize something like this to fit any sort of spiritual belief or practice you might have. So, definitely a cool project to do. And nothing about this was very expensive. I mean, hell, if you're thrifty and crafty enough, you can make something like this for absolutely nothing. But I definitely think I would like to make some more pocket altars for a future video, and maybe do some kind of giveaway. But we'll probably hold off on doing something like that until we hit some kind of big milestone or something. But that's just a thought for the future, I guess. Anyways, I'm gonna let the Fool take over so he can explain the absolute shit show you're about to see. So please, enjoy the rest of the video. I know I'm going to.
Well, we can't all be the boy with the golden butthole, so here I am, about to make a mistake I could have easily fixed without causing myself so much heartache. This is supposed to be a quick little project anyone can do, and if you have a little more common sense than the old fool here, like infinitely more, because I'm pretty sure I hit 0, you can do this easily. First things first, I'm cutting the border off of my card. I liked the idea of the box having my tarot card in it, and I pulled the card from the same deck as the Hermit. The deck was washed on the table, and someone did a 3-card draw for the channel, and both of us using that deck. The draw is currently hung on the wall in the hut, and coincidentally the Fool and the Hermit cards were right next to each other from the wash, so I didn't want to compromise this card in any way. Editor troll, I will foreshadow your face with my fist if you say another word. Just let them watch what happens for themselves. It all works out in the end. So I'm painting the inside of the box with black acrylic because I thought it would look nice. Functionally, I don't think it did much at all. Matter of fact, I spent all of this time adding texture only to later cover it up, so I'd say it was like gilding the lily, or really it's more like taking your pants off to fart. And then in the very next shot, after I set the paint aside, it's smooth. Why is that? Because I smoothed out the surface after realizing it could affect the adhesion of the card to the surface, so yeah, pointless. Next, I used some archival PVA glue, which is like fancy Elmer's, and stuck the card in, but that's not enough. No, I decided I was going to also cover it in UV resin, which not only failed to cure under the card correctly, but caused the lid to not be able to shut. At first, I decided to try and live with it and wrapped the box in goat fur and twine, but then I can't get into it that easily. I should have done this on the bottom of the box. Now I have to make the choice. Do I just get another card from one of my other decks, or do I try to painstakingly remove the card from the box I've messed up? That's right, you guessed it, I did it the way that necessitated a rotary tool and PPE. So I'm going to take the goat fur and twine off that's keeping the box shut and the contents inside the box, and I'll take the lid off of the box so that I can work on it without blasting the rest of the contents with resin dust. I'm already feeling optimistic here because realistically there's no swapping out the contents of my box or even seeing them on a regular basis as long as this is my method of keeping it shut. You can already see how bad this looks. The acrylic didn't adhere well, although I had tried to cure it with a heat gun on low heat. It's just flaking away and the UV resin isn't nice and smooth like I wanted. So ready or not, I just need to start cutting. Predictably, this is throwing a lot of resin dust, but what I did not predict is that the resin was going to be exceedingly difficult to get through with my cutoff wheel. Aluminum, zinc alloy, even steel will all immediately give in to the cutting power of a Dremel with a good cutoff wheel, but apparently UV resin is just built different. I'm using my cordless cutter because I thought that if I was cutting at higher speeds it would end up melting the resin from friction, and that was a nightmare I wanted to avoid. Eventually I realized that between the dust, snagging, and a complete lack of accuracy, it made way more sense to use a pair of tin snips to cut the card out, and this was way more effective. Not only was it more accurate, but cleaner and less effort. So problem number one is solved. We've removed the card from the box without destroying the design on the front of the card. This boy is thick as hell though, and the metal is stuck to the back. Like I said though, the UV resin underneath didn't fully cure, so I can peel it away, and sure, I lost the backing. But the card is covered in hard UV resin, and we won't see the back of the card when it's glued to the new pocket altar. What I do want to do is clean up the resin a bit more, so I cure it under UV light again off camera and get out some sandpaper, working my way from 800 up to 3000 grit. This is a little nerve-wracking because I can easily damage the front of the card if I sand too deep. I was able to clean it up. I didn't hurt the face of the card during sanding, so I hit the card with some jeweler's rouge on a buffing wheel and wiped it down with a little isopropyl, and now it looks pretty nice. Not like perfect glass, no, but legible and clear and serviceable for the project, and that's more than I could have ever hoped for. And this isn't a display piece, it's for me personally. I'm going to carry it daily, so as long as I'm happy with it, that's all that matters. I'll do a quick test fit in the new box, and this time I'm skipping the black acrylic and gluing it down with some Mod Podge like the Hermit did with his. I'll wipe away the excess Mod Podge and make sure it's nice and cured before moving on. Now, mistake number 2 was just throwing all the accoutrements in the altar box all willy-nilly and loosey-goosey like a jackass rather than making nice little containers for them, and little bits of herbs were breaking apart and falling out of the holes where the hinges go, even with the pocket altar held shut. So I carefully removed all the items from the box with a pair of tweezers and sorted them into piles to be used later when I reassemble everything. I'll need to reselect some of the gemstones and herbs so that all the pieces fit inside the vials I'm using. I've already got a vial in here that just has some black salts in it. For the gemstone vial, I'm using lapis lazuli, opal, bloodstone, citrine, and sardonyx. For the folks out there that subscribe to the idea of crystal magic, interpret that however you'd like. In another vial, I've got some sigils written on a strip of paper that I made myself with ink I made myself. And in the next vial, I've got cinnamon, eucalyptus leaf, mulberry leaf, dandelion, and lavender. Shout out to my green witches watching. Also, interpret that how you'd like, and if any of you make your own, obviously pick the things that speak to you most. Some people will prefer to switch out their pocket altar ingredients with their current goals in mind, or you may want one that's more generalized. I also have a buffalo tooth and some coins that have a personal meaning to me. One of these 3 is a replica coin that I got from eBay because the real deal is, well, not cheap to obtain and more of an investment. You get graded and keep in a safe. So if you're a collector of early 20th century Eastern European coins, stop freaking out about this one being cleaned and get some sunlight. I'm kidding, obviously, because I am him. I am that nerd collecting those coins, and I would be the one to recognize this particular coin. You may need to have a really keen eye to know that it's not quite the right diameter, and a scale to know that it's not the right weight, but it's a replica of a 1913 Russian imperial ruble, which was the 300th anniversary of the Romanov dynasty, and they commemorated that in a single year mint of this coin. The real deal is 90% silver, which was roughly sterling purity for the time and place. Anyway, that's the pocket altar completed. If you enjoyed watching, please like the video, comment your thoughts or suggestions, and of course, subscribe or be cursed to have to listen to me talk about Russian Imperial coins on a loop for all eternity.